we try to make it attractive. You were asking about bug bounties, like when I was a PhD student. Now you can earn very, very large bug bounties if you
Yeah.
find the right kind of bug. So it's definitely worth your time.
The funny fact is that even that Solidity was built especially for writing a smart contract, even people who use it really doesn't like it at all.
I always say is like, as an auditor, you should start by,
Reading the
looking at code.
docs. Like, we don't need other languages and Razors and Rust. Let's write it on the Rust.
Because if someone says create a new language, you should tell them they're insane. But
That's why we love crypto, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, it's very flattering.
you can reach out anybody anywhere. Hi everyone, you are watching a Hacking Proof security Web3 security podcast, and today with you, your host as usual, Alex, and our special guest, Sam. Sam is a creator of Move Language, co-founder and CTO of Mistin Labs, working on Sui network, and before worked with Facebook or Meta on Libra project, Move as well, Novi, and Facebook Infer. How are you today, Sam?
Hey, Alex. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to be here. I'm doing quite well. How are you doing?
Pretty much good. It's nice to have you here today. So, as usual, we're gonna start from some background check. So, could you please tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I started my career as a programming languages researcher. I did a PhD studying static program analysis tools and program verification at the University of Colorado. So as a grad student, what I did a lot of is I went to GitHub. I looked for examples of bugs. I tried to find like bugs that happen really frequently. I would do some cool math for tools that could detect these bugs with a high degree of accuracy. I would implement a tool that's implementing these techniques, run it on a bunch of code, find some bugs, maybe beg folks to fix the bugs. Maybe they'd fix it, maybe not. And, if they fixed like a couple of them, then we'd publish a paper and we'd be very happy. So I did this for about 5 years. And toward the end of my PhD, I did an internship at Facebook when they were making the big shift from being web first to being mobile first, and we're discovering that move fast and break things doesn't work as well when you don't control the release process. And so one thing they were trying is using static analysis tools like the ones I built as a PhD student at Facebook and putting them in CI to prevent bugs from going to the mobile apps in the first place. So I got really hooked by trying out this internship because it was like the same kind of cool technical work I did in my PhD, except that instead of begging people to fix things, like people are begging me to find different kinds of bugs, giving real feedback, having benchmarks that sort of work off the shelf. And it's just like, the same work, but, it's like really making a big difference. So after I finished my PhD, I joined Facebook and I worked for a number of years on this Infer project. We're doing all kinds of different static analyses, learning a lot about bugs, software design, software safety. Then in 2018, I joined the Libra project to put some of these ideas I had about language safety, design, etc., to work, and that's where creating Move came from. Then, as part of Libra, I learned a lot about the other aspects of blockchain in the broader crypto space. I work with distributed systems experts, with cryptographers, with economists, just learning a lot of different things and how they intersect with programming languages and just learning from scratch. This is where I met the folks that eventually co-found Mistin with, and in 2021 we hopped out of Facebook to found Mistin, and it's been a crazy journey since then. So we have designed and built Sui. We launched Sui in May of 2023. So it's been out for
We'll bring back to that question a bit later.
Yeah, we'll get
there. So you mentioned that you started from looking bugs on a GitHub in open source projects. How was the bug bounty market those years? Like, did you get paid for something or?
No, back then there really wasn't much in terms of bug bounty. I mean, you could like maybe get a bug bounty if you found like a brick an iPhone kind of bug, and the amount of money you would get would be maybe like $5,000 or $10,000. It's been quite different with crypto and Web3 bug bounties. I did one time find a bug in Android, and this is in the Android implementation of HashMap. Basically, like you could insert some poison into a map so that every hash map created after that would have those contents inside. So that was pretty cool. I reported it to Google and they did fix it. I thought that one might be bounty worthy, but they didn't think so. But no,
How
it
much
was all
they
for the
paid?
love. No bounties back then.
Nothing. So it was a zero bounty as a charity, like doing a good job, but unfortunately for free. Okay, bringing back to your experience at Facebook or Meta, you've been working for a lot of projects like Libra, Novi, as you mentioned, Facebook Infer, which is a static code analysis, and after that you joined a team to work on the own Facebook blockchain, yeah, and so the question is like, why? What was the goal to start building a new technology or new programming language like Move and not use already existed technologies like Solidity or EVM?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question to ask because you should never be setting out to design a new programming language. It's almost always the wrong thing to do. Even if the language is like 10x better than what's already there, things like community, existing examples, documentation, like they matter so much that like your language probably isn't
Yeah,
going to win. So with Libra, like we didn't come in like, hey, let's design a new programming language because that would have been insane. But we made the decision by just looking at a bunch of different options. So of course, like we looked at Solidity and EVM. Back then, Bitcoin script is also something we considered. We also looked at can we take a general purpose VM and use it to do the things you want to do with smart contracts? So we looked at WASM, we looked at the JVM, we looked at CLR, we looked at Skylark, which is this deterministic subset of Python that's used in some build systems. And basically, like what we ended up deciding is, there's what I call these table stakes requirements for a smart contract language, where it's like you just have to do these or it won't work. It's not subjective; it's like totally objective. Like it has to be deterministic because otherwise you may cause forks. And so that already like rules out a lot of like basically every general purpose language. There's going to be some sort of non-determinisms in there somewhere, whether it's iterating over hash maps or APIs to read from the disk or from the network and these sorts of things. So if you want to use a general purpose language, you start off by having to sort of make sure those things can't happen. And if you do
yeah.
that, that undoes a lot of the goodness of the general purpose language. Like, okay, you can't use off the shelf libraries, you can't use off the shelf tools, like all the familiarity is gone. So that was one of the main reasons not to use a general purpose language. Is like, well, the reason to do this would be for the familiarity, but it doesn't even satisfy these basic table stakes requirements. For
Yeah.
Solidity, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, like the funny fact is that even that Solidity was built especially for writing a smart contract. Even people who use it really doesn't like it at all. Like because from the scratch, it has so many issues like vulnerabilities which were not designed from the scratch, like reentrancy, buffer overflow. How many years we spent to solve buffer overflow issues in Solidity? So yeah. That the
Yeah, I
case.
mean, I think folks are, including myself, are very harsh on Solidity, and fairly so. I mean, I should say, and the EVM, it should get a lot of credit because at the time it was designed, like nobody knew what smart contracts were or what the issues were going to be. So just the fact that the first design
Yeah.
effort in this space has like stood the test of time and like powered a large industry is quite impressive. But I think like now we've seen these things and we can't unsee them, and so like something like Move coming second is really just going to have an enormous advantage in terms of being able knowing what smart contracts are going to be used for, what security issues come up, and being able to design to empower the good stuff and eliminate the bad stuff by construction is just really, really powerful. So that was basically, we were talking about like why not use Solidity the why create a new language. When we looked at this, we sort of understood from reading a lot of smart contracts, like what is the essence of what smart contract programmers want to do, and it's basically like they want to do access control, they want to create assets that have inherent scarcity and have this logic around exchanging, and then they don't want vulnerabilities or
Yes.
or behavior that's really dynamic or hard to reason about. And so it's like, okay, let's write a language that's not trying to do anything a general purpose language would do. Let's focus exactly on what smart programmers need to do, like have nice abstractions for scarcity and exchange, for access control, and then also just make everything extremely predictable, amenable to program analysis and verification like the stuff I used to, and also just easy for humans to reason about. So that was basically the rationale for creating a new language. It it was still a politically difficult decision. The leadership of the project, understandably, were skeptical, as they should be. Again, because like, if someone says create a new language, you should tell them they're insane. But I think in the end, they should get a lot of credit too for greenlighting the project and seeing why this was needed.
Yeah, how the decision making process looks like in a meta company. I mean, like you coming to them and saying like, okay, we need to build a new programming language from scratch. We need to do that to solve that issues, and how it looks like you have a manager or manager have a top manager who need to approve everything, and you need to build your own team, or how it looks like.
Yeah, so I should start by saying that Libra is very different from other Facebook efforts because it was almost run like a startup inside of Facebook, which
Uh-huh.
they don't do very often. So I think the process would be very different elsewhere and probably easier in Libra because everything was very experimental. But still, like there were these sorts of things. So my manager was Evan Chang, the CEO of Mistin Labs. So that made it easier. He was great in terms of putting his own neck on the line to support this project. And he's a programming languages guy himself. He was one of the core contributors to l.loriia and really
Mhm.
understands like what you can do by having the language stuff be right from the bedrock. And so he was a big advocate. So that certainly helps. If your immediate manager doesn't support it, then you're screwed. And then the Jim Everingham, who is the head of engineering at Libra, and David Marcus, who ran the project, like are also guys who like they're very ambitious. Like they really like big ideas and big visions. So I think they asked the right sort of pragmatic questions. Ben Maurer, who was the tech lead on the project, like, are you sure you don't provide the justification? But I think like they heard the arguments and they went for it. So there were a lot of discussions, but it's just all about telling the right story in terms of the motivation and showing that you've exhausted the set of options and landed on the best one. So that was basically how it happened. A lot of going around and
I
telling
see.
the story and
I
eventually
see.
getting the green light.
So yeah, do you remember your main technical challenges which you faced during building a move land at the beginning, and uh, what uh, what you can recommend to people who want to build their own programming language for smart contracts, or why they should not do that?
Yes, I'll tackle both of those. So beyond figuring out what to do, which is definitely the biggest challenge, I think one of the big challenges is smart contracts have this interesting deployment model where you have code that gets deployed and then it runs directly on the blockchain and attackers can directly link against and call your code. And you want this. Like the point is that you have this limitless interoperability. You don't want to stop anybody from calling anything. You just need to make sure that you can do it safely. And then you have the developer who's sitting here on their local machine writing code in a source language with a compiler. And so normally, if you're trying to do safe languages, like you put the safety in the compiler, like the compiler has a nice type system, you have all these tools that run on top of it, and then it gets
Yeah.
compiled to machine code and ships off and runs somewhere else. But the big challenge we had is we want those guarantees to hold on the equivalent of machine code. It's not enough to have them hold in the compiler because, of course, like a malicious person is just going to avoid using the compiler, write the nasty code directly in the low-level representation, and then publish that. So for this, like there are other languages that have done this, like the JVM and CLR have fairly high level bytecode representations that have a verifier, a WASM as well, that have a static verifier that runs every time you load the bytecode off of disk. It's running basically a little type checker that runs over the bytecode, and it's not for the benefit of the human programmer, but just making sure that this bytecode isn't malicious or satisfies some properties you care about. So this was one of the big technical challenges for us is having a source language type system, but then having a really efficient version of that at the bytecode level that's checking these sort of novel things we cared about for Move. Like for Move, it has this resource-based type system where you can say things like, I don't want this object to be copyable, or this object shouldn't be able to be dropped. It has to be explicitly destroyed. And this has to hold when these values flow across trust boundaries. And so designing the right bytecode format to be able to have this verifier be extremely efficient and also be very simple so that we're sure that it was right was a really interesting technical challenge. Some of the early folks on Libra, like Dario Rusi, who designed the bytecode format, Tom Nowacki, who designed the source language and worked a lot on the bytecode language design as well, Shaz Kadir, who is a luminary in the programming languages world and had a lot of great ideas about security stuff. Like it was really fun working with them to figure out how to make this whole setup work.
How big was the team at that moment? I mean, like technical team who were working on the core of the movelang and the compiler.
So this was playing out over the period from like 20 2018 when I started the project is the first one to 2020 when we left. I think there were probably at its peak was probably about 7 or 8 people. But early on,
Oh,
there's this core of about the four folks that I mentioned that were working super closely together.
whoa. Sounds like a pretty cool team you had.
Yeah. It was a really fun and exciting time. Just I don't know, starting something from scratch and like really just having the whole world open and having like a clear. That's the whole thing with, and you're asking what's the advice for someone else who's designing a smart contract language. I think like definitely other people should do it, but the key thing is like languages are problem solving tools. Like they're good to the extent that they know exactly what they're trying to do and they focus on that and don't get distracted. And they're bad to the extent to which, they try to do everything. If a language could do everything well, there would just be one language and we'd all use that. So
Yeah.
it's really about like understanding the problems and like making sure your design is laser focused. I think that's really what has made Move successful from the beginning, is being aligned with the core contributors on what those problems are, and just like we don't go outside of that. We just try to do those really, really well and don't worry about other stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned it that if everything can be built by one language, then we can use just one. And there is a bunch of Rust fans who think like that, like we don't need other languages than rather than Rust. Let's write it on the Rust everything. So, but yeah, what do you think about current state of Molang security? Like, do we have enough tools to analyze code? Do we have enough security engineers who can audit it well?
Yeah, so the answer is we always need more. I mean, the our philosophy from the beginning has been you want to bake as much into the core language as possible so that even if you don't use external tools or you don't have security experts or you don't have auditors, although of course you need and want auditors, that you can only things can only go so wrong. But I think
Yeah,
absolutely like these are all things that we need more of. So on the auditor front, like I'd really love to see more firms that are specializing in SWE or Move. I mean, I think there's a lot of firms that do some of each, but I think like this, it's just such a different. The things that go wrong in Move are just so different than the things that go wrong in the
yeah,
EVM or
definitely.
say on Solana. And so if you have auditors that come in, like they're often looking for issues that don't exist and like maybe not being aware of the things that are unique to Move. So I'd love to see that. In terms of tools, we have great linters that are integrated into the compiler, and I'm a big fan of linters. It's just like the next line of defense, and especially because it's a little bit customizable. We have I think we could use more push button static analyzers. There's a team called Asymptotic that's working on getting the move prover working for SWE. And I think verification is really great if you're a power user that knows how to write
Yeah.
these specs. But for your average Joe who doesn't know how to write specs, I think it's great to just have linters and fancy static analyzers that can find a lot of stuff for you. And then if you really care about correctness or if you get deep into it, then you push on the prover route and learn how to write specs and really go all the way to verifying your code.
Okay, but if we are talking about security teams or auditors who want to start auditing on Move, where they should start? Like maybe you and your team, you have some kind of mentorship programs for technical specialists, or maybe you can share any learning resources to start in it with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the thing I always say is like, as an auditor, you should start by, you know,
Reading the
looking at code.
docs.
What's that?
Yeah, read the
Yeah,
docs.
read the docs. Yeah, read the docs, or read enough of the docs so that you understand the code, and then start by like reading code, getting a sense of like what people do, and then like the easiest thing to get connected to in the ecosystem is to show value. So the tip I always give is the great thing about Move is that all the code is effectively open source. Like if you go to the top SWE Explorer, you can see the top 100 packages by DAW. And then because there's a decompiler that works really well, like whether they've uploaded the source or not, like the code is there and you can read through it and sort of look for problems. And any problem you find in those top 100 apps, like someone's going to be interested in it. You've probably found yourself a customer.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's a really, really like the movebook.com, great, the docs.swe.io, like, read these to get started. But then, it's really like about knowing that enough and then just like diving into the world of apps and learning like what the problems are and trying to find something. But we spend a lot of time talking to both individuals and teams who are trying to get into this space. But I think the real thing is like getting your hands dirty in terms of like looking at real code and finding real problems as soon as you can.
Yeah, definitely. But To be honest, I really like the approach of Move Beats Labs. The guys who are building a lot of security tools, analyzers. Actually, they do really nice audits for Movelang as well. So you can even learn from their audit reports. But the question is like how to onboard more into that sphere. Like if we have a bunch, I mean, like, what do you think? How many blockchain developers we have on the market right now?
So if you look at Electric Capital Developer Report, which is the best source of data I know of, although it's not perfect because it's just tracking code
Yeah,
that's open source and on GitHub and then tracked in this report, there's 26,000, which is not so many.
not much. Yeah.
Yeah, not so much. So Sui is about 4% of that, growing very quickly, like 60 grew 64% last year, but hope to grow a lot more. So I think like we have a long way to go in terms of approaching developer communities like mobile apps, 12 million people, with web apps, 16 million people. To them, this 26,000 number would be a rounding
Yeah.
error. So yeah, lots to do there.
So what do you think? How the onboarding approach should look like? Should we try to onboard people who already are blockchain developers, and force them to learn Move, or onboard them from somewhere else, like I don't know, AI sphere or general development to build on in a blockchain on a Move?
Yeah. So of course the answer is both, and I think the approach is different depending on which segment you're targeting. So for folks who are in blockchain already, I think like Move is definitely the best way to attract them, because when we have folks that are coming from Solana or coming from the EVM and they try out Move, I think they see like they already know smart contracts and they know like what kind of code they want to write. I think they pick up Move and they try it. They're like, oh, this is faster. It doesn't have I don't have to worry about many of the security issues that I would have to here. It's sort of, I can see the way it's designed for me and the things I want to do. But for somebody coming from outside of crypto, I would say like, don't look at Move. Like, we love Move, but stay away from Move and smart contracts as long as you can. Stay in TypeScript or backend code where you're comfortable, and then drop into smart contracts only where you need to. And so in Swede, the way we deal with that is we have this programmable transaction blocks concept where when you send a transaction, it doesn't just call one function, it can call an arbitrary number of functions. Each call outputs typed objects that can then be piped into the result of the next call or subsequent call. So it's like gluing together these nice, strongly typed Lego blocks. And they're nice SDKs for doing this from TypeScript. And so there it just looks like, okay, you're calling a bunch of functions and you're actually calling on-chain functions and putting the results together. But to you, it just looks like any other code. And so you don't have to worry about the fact that it's Move or you're doing something blockchain-y. It's just an API that's doing something that you need for your app. It's like, oh, great, I'm creating digital collectibles for my fans, or I'm doing this trade on a marketplace, or I'm doing this game thing. And so there, it's like you want to meet the developers where they are, not have them do anything unfamiliar. Just provide value for their product instead of making them become some crazy crypto person if they don't want to.
Yeah, so just build these things that are more understandable for them. Yeah, rather than,
Yeah,
than
exactly.
how the blockchain development looks like so far. So Aptos and Sui both use Molang, and from your point of view, how these two blockchains how Sui blockchain differentiate themselves from Aptos, and what are the main difference between Sui move and Aptos Molang?
Yes, so I think the biggest difference is this unifying abstraction and of objects we've introduced in Sui. So when I hopped out of Facebook to start Mistin, Move obviously existed and we'd worked on it, but the great thing was there wasn't this big set of legacy code or like usage that we had to be backward compatible with. So when starting Sui, we questioned everything, or like or starting Mistin, we questioned everything. Like, we'll build everything from scratch. Like, what would we want? We don't have to take anything. We could start over with the EVM if we wanted to. And what we decided was that Move is mostly good, but that this account-based model that we had done sort of like being similar to the EVM was something that was quite limiting. And like what you really wanted to do is have everything be based on objects and not have this be just a Move concept, but the Sui system should be aware of objects and it should use them for optimization purposes and performance. Explorers and wallets should be aware of objects and should show them directly to users. APIs should take objects as input and return objects as output. And this would just eliminate a lot of indirection throughout the stack and simplify things a lot. So I think that's the biggest difference, is that in Sui, we're really all in on these objects. And so like at the system layer, transactions say what objects they're going to touch. And this is how we're able to do efficient parallel execution, because we use the static information to farm out execution across cores. This is how we've been able to demonstrate horizontal scalability with Pilotfish, because like this trick works not only for distributing across cores, but distributing across machines. This Sui fast path where we can have transactions go through a faster version of consensus if they're only touching objects that have a single owner, is because we have these objects with native ownership information and everything's an object. And then PTB is also are enabled by objects, because it's all about move functions that are taking and returning objects and sort of stitching these together at the API layer. And then similarly, a lot of the nice experiences of Sui wallets and Sui apps. So I think that's really the key difference. I mean, that sounds like only one thing, but I think it's like it just breaks down a lot of the abstraction barriers that previously existed between these components and allows for a more cohesive programming and user experience.
And what do you think is how does the object-centric data model in Sui differ from traditional blockchain models, in your opinion? It's just about the speed, or what else?
So I think it's so speed helps. It helps for speed for sure. I think it's really just about conceptual clarity and simplicity beyond anything else. Like I think smart contracts in Web3, it's about assets, it's about items, or it's about objects. You know, if you want to use the word
it makes sense.
And then the accounts are things that own objects, but they're not the same thing. And so I think it just ends up being a lot clearer if you think of it that way. Like everything, like if you look at any smart contract, the first thing it's going to be doing is like, oh, there's something that a user owns. Like I better check that they're actually the person who has the permission to use this. And then you want to be able to say, take this thing and transfer it to somebody else. So with the object data model, these things are just built into every object. It's not something you have to hand roll. Every object already has native ownership info, and it supports transferability. So that takes away 20% of the things you might have to write yourself in code, and also takes away the possibility of you getting these things wrong. And similarly, like, okay, that's at the smart contract layer, but then at the front end layer, you're like, okay, I want to show the user what they have. And if you have an account model where like this is locked away in some big map of like bytes to other bytes, then you have to have some recipe, like EVM view functions for showing someone how to show this thing. Both objects, like they just have a display function that tells you, how do I show this up, and how do I show this in CSS, or like render an image associated with it. And this is how it shows up in a wallet or a marketplace or an explorer. And so just these things that everyone in the stack needs to care about, they're all just pinned onto objects, and there's common implementations of the things that don't need to be customized.
Okay, yeah, thanks for an answer. It totally makes sense. Okay, let's talk more about scalability. In terms of blockchain scalability, Sui is built to handle huge an amount of transaction. Yeah, so can you share more about the innovations behind scalability and parallelization? I mean, like last week, maybe last week, Sui surpassed Solana in number of daily transactions. And like, what is the limit? Do you do any kind of stress testing for the blockchain protocol itself, or can we calculate it somehow? Like how many transactions you can
we've been having a lot of traffic over the past week. I think several days, over 50 million transactions. A couple of popular projects that are driving this. So we don't think of what is the limit in absolute terms. We think of like the limit is relative to how much hardware you're going to give me. And this has been a design goal of Sui from the beginning, which is, if you give me one machine with one core, we're going to give you some level of performance. Now you give me 8 cores, I'm going to give you more performance. Now, okay, you've maxed out the number of cores in the machine that AWS will give me for the machines that they have. So you're going to give me a second machine. Now I want to be able to get proportionally more performance. You don't know what demand is going to look like in the future, so you don't want to have a single limit, because you don't know what will be enough. And then the other thing is that you don't want to have, we know that traffic is very spiky. It's certainly true for us. Like, on a normal day before last week, we're getting a couple million, like single digit million transactions, and now it's 50 million. And so you don't want baseline operating costs to be the cost of your spikes. You want to be able to add resources and scale up and down depending on your demand, just like Web2 giants do. And
Yeah.
so we designed from the beginning to be parallelizable across cores, but also parallelizable across machines so that we can enable both of these goals. So in Sui mainnet today, all the validators are single box. They have a lot of cores, and we're able to handle plenty of traffic that way. With this pilot fish prototype that the research team has created, we've shown that you can scale throughput linearly by adding more machines proportional to the number of machines you add without increasing latency. And that part is really key too, because we're really happy with this 700 millisecond, 400 millisecond latency we get on transactions, and it would be a bummer if we start to handle more traffic and that gets slower. So that's basically our approach here. Is the data model has been very careful, and transaction model have been very carefully designed to enable these properties, and then we have the proof point for being able to do this whenever the traffic actually reaches that point. I think it'll be a bit, but
it's very similar to how web applications scale themselves, like with Kubernetes or solutions like that, where you can just adding more resources, more machines, and you can scale automatically without losses in latency. Yeah. Okay. What are your thoughts on the future of smart contract safety, and how do you envision Move becoming a standard of blockchain programming from your point of view?
Yeah. So I think, I've said before that I think smart contract safety is an existential threat to broader crypto adoption or broader crypto developer adoption, because already, we talked about there's this small community of 26,000 people who are
Yeah.
sort of the most hardcore and security conscious developers you can hope for. They all understand the underlying blockchains, they know the attacks, they're sort of all about security, and they still can't write safe code. And so if you imagine this set growing by bringing in the other people we're talking about, there's sort of product developers who want to build something and they're not interested in trying to become a blockchain security expert. You can imagine that the security problem is going to become even worse. And so I think smart contract safety at the bedrock layer, like in language safety, like Move, is a requirement to grow the developer population much beyond what we're having today. Otherwise, we'll try, and the security issues, it'll just get worse, and it'll hurt the reputation of the space. It'll hurt it'll hurt certain use cases, and it's just not going to work out very well. And so I think basically it's a prerequisite. I think Move is a sort of the best contender for this, but I think any future smart contract language that's going to help the space grow really needs to have baked-in safety as much as possible, eliminating issues like re-entrancy, eliminating arithmetic issues, having native access control like we have in Sui. I think it's really going to be a requirement. And so I think it could be a different language, but I think Move is the best contender. I think it's the third largest in crypto today after the EVM and Solana. Solana is like 11% market share. Move is like 7% overall. And it's small, but it's growing very, very fast. And I think language adoption is a hard problem. And I think it's a strong contender.
We've seen that from the beginning of the September. But what do you think about Solana, by the way? What do you think about their approach to work with smart contracts, and why they drop sometimes?
Why they drop?
Like why they Solana shoot down sometimes from time to time?
Oh yeah, I mean, so first of all, like Solana is an amazing team. Like I think they pioneered the high throughput, like high performance blockchain category, and are worthy of a ton of respect for that. And I think the approach they have to programming and the VM level was super creative. I mentioned we looked at a lot of options for Move. eBPF, which is what they use at the bytecode level, is like not one of the things we looked at, but I think is a very interesting choice. It's also a bytecode that has these interesting built-in safety guarantees and have some built-in metering, but it was built for a very different purpose. Like eBPF is all about you run it in kernel space, and it's like very, very fast, like discarding bad network packets and things like that. It doesn't have the sort of properties that Move has. So I think like the approach of, okay, we'll take Rust, which a great language, we write everything, and Move is implemented in Rust, Sui is implemented in Rust, all of this, and then we try to sort of make it into a smart contract language. It is a decent approach, but I think it has these problems that sort of made us not want to go with a general purpose language in the first place, which is, okay, Rust doesn't have coins, it doesn't have accounts, it doesn't have a smart contract, so you're going to need to add some sort of SDK or library on top of it. and then you have to avoid using things that are non-deterministic. So this is going to preclude you from using some common Rust libraries. And the code you'll end up writing, some of it will look like Rust, but a lot of it will just end up looking like the particular library that you have. And if you have a task, like a library is good, but I think a language that's directly pointed at the problem you're trying to solve is always better. So, big fan of the team, the technology, and the stack they use for building stuff. But I think it's just all about, like, with Move, like, this is purpose built for exactly what we're trying to do, rather than an existing technology that's adapted to do something it wasn't designed to do.
Yeah, and it seems like from a point of view of the community, the people started comparing Solana and Sui recently. Yeah, I seen in the latest news that 70% of TVL moved from Solana to Sui itself, and seems like, yeah, people are saying like Sui is a new Solana so far.
There's a lot of overlap in the developer communities and in sort of the core community. And I think because, like, they pioneered the high performance, and I think that too, but also I think sort of product focus and, like, trying to build real stuff. So I think there's a lot of people who have those ideals and try out Sweet, and like, oh, from the developer perspective, like, this does these things that attracted me to here, but maybe I like the programming experience better, or like the little bit of extra speed is important to me, or these sorts of things.
Oh, okay. Well, one more question about Move blockchains. What do you think about Movement Labs' approach about building layer 2 and Ethereum with a Move under that? Like, what do you think about that approach? Do you believe that we need we need more layer 2s on Ethereum with Move, or we need more layer 1 blockchains who use Move?
So to be honest, I don't, I'm what I would describe as an atomic composability maxi. I think the value of a blockchain is directly proportional to the amount of shared state you have on the same platform that can be
Yeah.
touched by a single smart contract, by a single transaction. If you start to fragment state, whether it's across layer twos, whether it's across different layer ones, or whether it's, across a sharding scheme within your layer one that makes sort of different islands that can't be
Yeah.
hit atomically by the same transaction, then you're fragmenting the core value proposition. Now, of course, so I think, like, the ideal architecture is like one giant chain that everyone uses. Now, of course, we're not going to have that. Like, there's path dependency. The world evolved the way it did. There are many successful chains. I think there will probably be more as well. But I think, like, the layer two scaling thesis, like, I think there are reasons to have layer twos, but the reasons might be, like, privacy, for example, or, like, wanting some level of customization that you can't get at the layer one level. But I don't think it's a good scaling strategy, because you're fragmenting this core value proposition.
Yeah.
Now, if it's the only way to scale, and I think, like, some layer two proponents would argue this, then that's fine. You can, like, say, like, well, I wish it was possible to, like, do it all at the layer one level, but it's not. So we'll pay this compromise, and we'll fragment the state, and we'll do what we have to do. But I think chains like Sui are showing that this is not, like, that is not true. Like, you can do it at the layer one level, and you don't have to make this compromise if you don't want to.
Yeah, the liquidity fragmentation is very hot topic right now, because, like, it's not really good for the whole ecosystem at all. And maybe we will see more cross-chain protocols who will try to solve that issue, but still it will not solve it from the roots.
Exactly. You can mitigate it, and cross-chain protocols and bridges and, like, LT interop, like, they mitigate the issue, but it would be better just not to create this issue in the first place. It's sort of a high level take. Easy to say, harder to actually enforce. Ecosystems are going to evolve the way they're going to evolve.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, from the point of view of our community, we have a lot of security engineers who listen in us today, maybe, and the question is, like, if they want to do some contribution to Sui blockchain itself, how they can do that? Like, maybe your team looking for some new tools which would nice to be developed in your ecosystem, and or yeah, what do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, let me start off by saying thanks to Hack and Proof. Like they've been amazing partners for Mistin, and I think to the Suite community
Thanks so
too. Like the
much.
bug bounty programs are great. We get a lot of really good eyes on stuff we put out there. We've had some interesting findings, like the white hats that come in through Hack and Proof are really excellent. So already they've made lots of contributions. So I think the first I'd say is like, all of the bug bounty programs. There's the Suite Foundation program for Suite, but then there are also Mistin ones, say for the wallet and for individual Mistin products. We love having more eyes on those. I think the advice I was giving to sort of auditors trying to get started, like looking at the top 100 apps, I think any tools that sort of help with that process, and we're launching an exciting new thing that I think will be really good to build these sorts of tools on top of, something called the Move registry, where it's a little bit like crates.io or npm for Move, where you register your package, you give a human readable name, and has a pointer to the code for your package, source code, not bytecode.
Oh,
And then when you're building, you can link against names instead of against like inscrutable package IDs, and it just makes it a lot easier to have like the sort of normal language ecosystem experience. So once that stuff is there, I think all the we're building the basics, but then all the stuff that you have in a normal npm or crates.io, there's a vulnerability notification, like who's affected because they depend on this.
yeah.
Scanning tools, looking for copycat packages, looking for malicious code, looking for bugs. I think you can do this to some extent with bytecode today, but I think a lot of people like don't want to go through the pain of that. So being able to start from the source code level and have this registry to hook into is going to be a really exciting opportunity for tool builders and for security folks.
Thanks for mentioning bug bounty program. Yeah, for those who don't know, the SUI bug bounty program focused not only on the protocol security, but there is also mentioned some products like Deepbook, where you also can look for an issue in smart contracts itself, and they have a really nice bounty reward, so don't miss it out.
Yeah, we try to make it attractive. You were asking about bug bounties, like when I was a PhD student. Now you can earn very, very large bug bounties if you have the right kind of bug, so it's definitely worth your time. PhD student.
The bug bounty market in crypto is kind of different from that bug bounty market.
But hey, it's priced this way for a reason, because the vulnerabilities cost you more if they happen in prod. So it's a great thing for
yeah, definitely. So Mistin Labs has grown rapidly since its founding in 2021, and back there you was like a technical guy, a developer, a builder, and right now you are a CTO and co-founder and entrepreneur. And what do you like more? It's building something or being a manager?
Oh man, I mean, it's really different. So manager is not a big part of my role right now. I have only one direct report who's our head of engineering, who does most of running the org. So he's fantastic, and we have a really strong partnership. So I still do get to focus most of my time on, and of course I do a lot of stuff running the company, but I still get to spend the majority of my time working on technical stuff. It's not as much hands-on coding. I mean, I do still write a lot of code, but it's more probing the edges of Suite developer experience, so I understand the product and understand like what we can do better. It's not like writing production code as much, because what'll happen is like, I'll start writing some production code and then get pulled into other stuff for 2 weeks, and then I'm blocking other people. So I don't want that. But I think like as someone who's building a developer platform, like you absolutely have to be a developer and understand what's working, how it works, what the opportunity is to do things next are. So I do a lot of that. But I think the thing that I really like the most about my role now that didn't exist early on is like, now we have this Suite developer community with a ton of energy. So I spend a lot of time talking to these folks, helping them at the technical level, but also sort of at the business level in terms of like what product they're building, how they should position themselves, like who else they should be in touch with. So that part I find really, really gratifying. Both the technical parts and sort of the social parts. With Suite, like with Move, with Suite, we had this whole vision, and people with a lot of projects, they're like, oh, it's very similar to other things. You sort of get like grant hunters or people sort of hopping over. With us, like what we were doing was different. So people only did it if they've really, like understood and like and felt the appeal of it, and they came because like they loved it and they're willing to go through the pain of learning something new. And so I think that's built a really fanatical and cohesive and sort of creative and interesting developer community that's just a real pleasure to work with. So I think that's my favorite part of my job now. I like the early phase too, where I was writing a lot of production code and just getting Sui up and running and getting stuff working. But there are different kinds of joys, I would say.
Yeah, and how big is the team right now?
Yeah, let's see. At Mistin, we're over 100. It's always hard to count these things because we're very
Definitely,
split up
it's
and
even
very.
hard to count it in the
Yeah,
small teams,
exactly.
you know.
The engineering part of that is a bit smaller. We definitely on engineering bias toward like really small but like talent dense teams. But on the other hand, like we're doing quite a lot of things in Mistin. Like we do a lot of the Sui core maintenance. We're launching Walrus, this decentralized storage network. We're quite excited about that. We also maintain the Sui wallet. We've got Deepbook. We've got Inoki, and so we've got a research team that are also great engineers. So it's it's a great group of folks to work with.
Do your team collaborate somehow with developers who trying to build on top of Sui? I mean, like, okay, we are a team of developers, just finished a hackathon or finished few courses of move development and now trying to build some kind of landing protocol. Maybe they can outreach your team directly or somehow collaborate together to start building something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the most important things that we do, and one of my favorite things that we do. So I mentioned doing this personally, but a lot of our technical folks, engineers and researchers, are doing this as well. So I think like there are many different ways to get in touch. Like there's forums.sui.io for technical questions. There's the Discord if you want more sort of real time support. There's a Sui developer group, Suinami Writers. You can DM me to get added. And then there's also just reaching out to, we have many technical folks on Twitter joining in technical conversations, like both from the community and from Mistin. I think like just talk, like everyone is very accessible. Like if you DM them to ask a good question or talk about your project or just showing like genuine interest and curiosity, then we'll find some way to get in touch and start figuring out how to help and direct you to the experts inside Mistin who can be the most helpful too.
Yeah, that's why we love crypto, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah, it's very
you
flattering.
you can reach out anybody anywhere and get the fastest feedback ever. Like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, you did something wrong. I will type it in Twitter so we will see it.
I love the collaborative nature, right? Like, yeah, like the thanks for fudding. You gave me a laugh. Like, now let's talk and see if
Yeah, yeah.
see how we can help.
Okay. How do you see the Web3 and landscape evolving over the next few years, and where does Sui fit into that future?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, so
where?
it's a very broad question, but I think the direction that I hope to see it evolving, and I think that we're certainly pushing for at Mistin, is getting deeper into more mainstream use cases that are just touching way more users. And I think especially like a problem we're focused on is getting beyond what I like to call the wallet install barrier to use anything in crypto. Like, we talked about the small number of developers. For a number of users, it's sort of, there's a similar cap in like total wallet installs. It's like 60 million across all of crypto or something. And that's all wallets, not just on Sui. And so like if that's the only people who can use your chain, like that's a very small audience and somewhat of an idiosyncratic audience. Like no matter how good wallets are, the experience of downloading and doing seed phrases and getting tokens and all that is quite painful. And so we're really focused on things like ZK login and
Yeah.
that allow you to use apps without having to go through this whole process to provide Sui utility under the hood without having to deal with crypto-y stuff. So I think using these technological pieces to expand into new areas, like whether that's institutional finance, whether it's gaming, whether it's, we talk about Sui as this global coordination layer, creating interesting new kinds of markets. Like one project I love that we have today is called 3DOS, where it's they have an operating system for 3D printers, and like they're using Sui as a coordination layer to connect people who own printers with people who want to get stuff printed near them. And so I think like there's just lots of little cases like this where this is a market. It's something where like it couldn't exist otherwise, or is like most convenient to do this way. And you're like, oh, you're just eliminating these middlemen and providing this direct form of coordination of incentivization that can exist elsewhere. Like that's that's a place where I hope we're going. I think the role Sui will play, I hope, is that we have the capacity to onboard any number of any amount of traffic, we hope, and any number of users, and then we have these things like ZK login for breaking down the barriers for getting access in the first place. So I hope it'll become the home for product builders that are trying to solve real problems and enter new areas.
Yeah, but what do you think about that? So that we have a crisis of narratives in the crypto right now. Like, we have DeFi, and that's it. Like, nobody knows what to do else. Like, let's build another landing protocol or another DEX, and that's it. Like, yeah, of course, ZK login helped to onboard a lot of people. Actually, I showed that for my non-crypto friend, and yeah, he was like, okay, I signed it up with Google. That's it. Yes, that's it, bro.
Yeah,
And he
exactly.
didn't
This is
imagine
only
it.
the entry. It's not a thing in itself. This is only the entry point for being able to do something, and what should that something be?
Yeah.
So I think this is my research background, but like narratives are narratives. They're like short term. And like there's no point in chasing them. Like there's only one thing, and that's solving problems. And it's like trying to solve problems that can't be solved with another technology or that are best solved with this technology stack. And so when we're looking at partners, when we're looking at builders, like that's the thing that we're really focusing on or getting excited about. We're not like, does this fit into the current narrative? We're like, what is the problem this person trying to solve? Is it important? Are they passionate about it? Can Sui help them? Can Walrus help them? Can some more other technologies help them? Then that's where we end up going. So like we have our theses about like what verticals and what areas that it happens in, but like we'll talk to anybody who we think is solving a compelling problem.
Yeah. Look for a product market fit. Yeah, the main metrics.
Exactly.
Okay. For aspiring developers and entrepreneurs looking to enter the blockchain space, what advice would you give them based on your journey with Move and Sui?
Yeah, so I think depending on what route they're trying to take, so if they're a builder looking to build on top of a chain like Sui, I think it would be similar to what I was saying before. It's like, you know, the you can look to be a crypto builder, but you could also just look to like what are you passionate about? What problems are you interested in? Is there a way that Sui can fit into that? Is there a way that Move can? Great, like let's talk and try to figure that part out. But I think that's a lot easier than saying like I'd like to build something in crypto per se. On the other hand, like you can say I want to build on crypto per se, and then you're looking at what are problems that crypto developers have. Like if you're a DeFi builder, like maybe you might need some security tools or like some new libraries. Maybe there's like a different kind of interoperability protocol that you might need. So like if you're just like interested in the space as a whole, I think that's a good way to get in. Like talk to them, like get into one of the Sui developer communities. See what people are complaining about that can't be solved already in our roadmap by improving the Move and the core libraries and Sui core itself, and then see if there's a product niche there. And then I think, let's see, beyond that, another thing that people could be looking to do is, hey, like, I'm not looking to start a company or do my own thing per se. Like, I just like the industry. I'm looking to work at a place like Mistin or be a Move developer at a protocol that's working on Sui. And I think there too, like the best entry point is one of these community groups. I think there's a huge demand for Move developers at the moment, like maybe more than there are. So just saying like what you're interested in, just like putting yourself out there, and then we can help hook you up to job boards or the protocols that we know who are looking for help. And of course, Mistin has its own job board as well.
Yeah, definitely. The blockchain sphere is very collaborative, and you can easily find a team, the friends, and people with who you can build something, and just try it. Yeah.
Exactly. Just try it. Just say hi. Just put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Hopefully get
Okay.
lots of experience.
And it seems like we are out of questions. So if you have any final thoughts, please feel free to share it to our listeners today.
I think no final thoughts other than to thank you, Alex. This is a really fun and engaging conversation. I really, really appreciate the time. This is great.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today. And it was a Sam, CTO of Mysten Labs. You was listening Hacking Proof, a Web3 security podcast with your hosts. And see you in next episodes. Bye bye.